I believed hope was a virtue once, not merely permitted but required. I was taught that it separated us from the beasts we hunted and the heretics we burned, that it was the quiet flame the Emperor himself had placed within mankind, so that we might endure the long night between the stars. I believed it as a child on Macragge, believed it as a neophyte choking on my own blood beneath the apothecarian lights, believed it as a full battle brother standing unbroken in the shield wall while bolter fire turned the air to screaming battle. I believed hope was strength. I know better now. Hope is not forbidden in the Imperium because it is weak. Hope is forbidden because it is dangerous. I did not understand this when I first stood beneath the banners of the Death Watch, my chapter colors stripped from my pauldron as if they were merely cloth, and not centuries of honor and lineage carved into ceramite. I thought the pain I felt was pride, that the hollow in my chest was anticipation. I thought I was ascending. In truth, I was being hollowed out, made ready to see what hope does to those who cling to it too tightly in a galaxy that exists solely to punish such weakness. The Imperium does not tell you this directly. It does not need to. It teaches through repetition, through casualty figures etched into adamantium tablets, through worlds that go dark and are never spoken of again. It teaches through the ecclesiarchy's sermons, where hope is always conditional, always deferred, always promised only after death. It teaches through the administratum's endless parchments, where human lives are reduced to numerals that must balance, where hope has no column because it cannot be quantified. And it teaches most effectively through the Inquisition, who understand that hope is the crack through which damnation enters. I saw it first on Talisa Prime, the dead moon where the Watch Fortress clung to basalt like a parasite refusing to die. The sky there was a permanent wound, bruised iron and sickly radiation, the kind of sky that makes you forget what blue ever looked like. We were deployed against a gene-stealer cult that had infested a mining complex beneath the surface. A routine purge by Deathwatch standards, Xenos corruption, total extermination, no survivors. That was the briefing, but the briefing does not tell you about the humans. It never does. They were miners once, families, children. They had names, though the cult had replaced them with numbers and sigils scratched into flesh. As we advanced through the tunnels, Auspex readings flaring and bolters roaring, I saw them emerge from the shadows, not with weapons raised, but with hands outstretched. Their mouths formed words I could not hear over the gunfire, but I saw the shapes of them. Please, help us. Emperor, protect us. They believed the angels of death would save them. Brother Helcarian did not hesitate. His frag cannon reduced them to mist and bone shards, efficient and absolute. I remember the way my bolter shook in my hands, the infinitesimal pause before I fired. In that pause, hope lived. In that pause, corruption could have taken root. The watch sergeant noticed. They always do. Later in the debriefing chamber, beneath the cold gaze of a skull-faced servitor, he told me this was my first lesson. The Imperium does not reward hope. It exterminates it before it can mutate. Hope is a promise of a future different from the present, and in the Imperium, the present is sacred. The Imperium survives because it does not imagine better tomorrows. It grinds through worse todays with relentless momentum. Every citizen taught to hope is a citizen who might question why their life is spent in darkness, why their children are tithed, why their world bleeds to support wars they will never understand. Hope creates questions. Questions lead to doubt. Doubt is the first prayer to the dark gods. I have watched entire worlds burn because someone hoped. On the agri-world of Virexia, the governor believed he could improve conditions for his workers, believed that increased rations and reduced tithes would create loyalty and productivity. He believed the Imperium would understand. What he created instead was expectation. The workers began to believe suffering was not inevitable. When the inevitable shortages returned, when the tithe fleets arrived to collect what had been promised elsewhere, the workers revolted. Not for chaos. Not at first. They revolted for a memory of hope. Chaos merely answered when the screams became loud enough. The Astra Militarum was deployed. I watched regiments of farm-born soldiers march through fields they had once worked, las guns raised against their own kind. I watched artillery turn grain silos into pyres. When it was over, the Inquisition arrived, and Virexia was reclassified as a cautionary footnote. The governor's name was erased. The survivors were sterilized and shipped to penal legions. The lesson was recorded and distributed to sector authorities. Do not cultivate hope. It breeds instability. Even space marines are not immune, perhaps especially not. We are told we are hope made manifest, the Emperor's angels, symbols to inspire mankind. That is a lie we tell others so we do not have to confront the truth ourselves. We are weapons, and weapons that believe they are saviors are prone to misfire. I have fought alongside chapters who still believe they can make a difference beyond the battlefield, who speak of protecting the innocent as if innocence is a renewable resource. They burn out faster. They break in quieter ways. I remember a salamander once, Brother Captain Tikel, standing amidst the ruins of a hab block we had just cleared of Drukhari raiders. He lifted a wounded child from the rubble, his massive gauntlets impossibly gentle. He spoke to her softly, promising safety, promising the Emperor's light. I admired him for it. I envied him. 3 days later, that same child detonated a concealed device during a victory assembly, killing 20 guardsmen and crippling Tikel himself. The Drukhari had taught her hope too, the hope of escape through vengeance. The salamanders did not learn from this. They never do. That is why they suffer more than most. Hope is a currency in the Imperium, and it is always counterfeit. The ecclesiarchy promises salvation after death, carefully ensuring it never interferes with obedience before it. The administratum promises stability, so long as every cog accepts it will never see the whole machine. The Imperium promises humanity will endure, but never that any individual human will matter. The moment hope becomes personal, it becomes heretical. I learned this most clearly during an inquisitorial operation in the Ghoul Stars, where the darkness between systems feels thicker, more intentional. We were hunting a heretic cult that had uncovered pre-imperial data vaults, fragments of forgotten technology, and worse, forgotten ideas. They believed humanity had once been more than it is now. They believed regression was not inevitable. They believed the Emperor had wanted progress, not stagnation. They hoped. The data vault was sealed with sigils older than the Imperium itself, and inside were records of starships that did not require navigators, of machines that healed rather than consumed flesh, of societies that governed without fear. Lies, of course. Dangerous lies. The cultists had built their entire identity around these fragments, teaching their children that the Imperium was a temporary darkness before a brighter age. When we breached the inner sanctum, they did not fight. They knelt. They begged us to read, to understand, to remember. I burned the vault myself. Promethium washed over data cores older than Macragge, over ideas that could have reshaped humanity. As the flames rose, I felt something twist inside me, something that might once have been hope. I crushed it. That night, the Inquisitor commended me for my clarity of purpose. He told me I had learned the true nature of loyalty. Loyalty is not faith that things will improve. Loyalty is the willingness to ensure they never change. This is why hope is dangerous. It invites comparison. It suggests that the Imperium could be other than it is, and the Imperium cannot afford alternatives. It is a fortress under eternal siege, and fortresses do not redecorate while the walls are burning. Every resource, every life, every thought must be directed outward, toward survival at any cost. Hope looks inward. Hope asks what survival is for. I no longer ask that question. I have seen too much of what answers it brings. I have seen guardsmen refuse orders because they believed a better plan existed. I have seen planetary defense forces hesitate because they hoped negotiations were possible. I have seen civilians cling to rumors of rescue while evacuation windows closed. Each time, hope added to the body count. The Imperium endures not because it inspires, but because it terrifies. Fear is reliable. Fear does not imagine alternatives. Fear keeps the manufactorum lines moving, the tithe ships full, the regiments marching. Fear does not open doors to the warp. Hope does. If you are listening to this, if you are drawn to the idea that humanity deserves more than endless war and grinding misery, understand this. The galaxy does not care what we deserve. The galaxy rewards only what survives. The Imperium survives by strangling hope at birth, by teaching its people that suffering is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be endured. That is the true faith of the Imperium, unspoken but absolute. I believed hope was an honor once. I believed it made us human. Now I know the Imperium survives because it teaches us to live without it. And in a galaxy where gods are born from emotion and nightmares wear the faces of angels, That may be the cruelest mercy we have left. If you want me to continue seamlessly toward full 45-minute length, just say continue, and I will carry on without breaking tone or flow. I did not arrive at this understanding all at once. No revelation descended from the heavens, no sudden clarity granted by prayer or vision. The Imperium does not enlighten, it erodes. Truth is revealed the way bone appears beneath flesh. Slowly through loss, each campaign strips away another layer of illusion, until all that remains is function. I function well now. That is the highest praise one can earn. There was a time I thought hope might still have a place among those who know better, among the transhuman, the indoctrinated, the reforged. We are told we are beyond such frailties, that our minds are fortified as our bodies are. That too is a lie, or perhaps a half-truth more dangerous than a full one. We do not lose the capacity for hope. We simply learn to weaponize it, to aim it outward away from ourselves, like a beacon that draws others into the firing line. I remember a compliance action on the frontier world of Enoch's Rest, a dust-choked sphere with a thin atmosphere and thinner loyalty. The planetary governor had delayed tithe payments for 3 consecutive cycles, citing crop failure and infrastructure collapse. When the Imperial delegation arrived, accompanied by our kill team, the governor spoke not of rebellion, but of optimism. He spoke of recovery. He spoke of rebuilding. He spoke of hope. He had gathered the population in the central plaza, beneath banners hastily repainted with aquilas that still smelled of fresh pigment. He wanted us there, towering above the crowd, ceramite giants framed against the sky, living proof that the Imperium had not abandoned them. As he spoke, I saw the faces of the civilians turn upward, eyes wide, mouths open, something fragile blooming behind their fear. They believed our presence meant salvation. They believed the worst was over. The watch captain ordered me to stand motionless, helm locked forward, weapons mag sealed. I complied. Inside my helm, my jaw tightened. I knew what would follow. The administratum envoy read the decree in a flat, mechanical voice. The tithe was overdue, the shortfall unacceptable. Enoch's Rest was to be reclassified as delinquent. Punitive measures would be enacted to ensure future compliance. The crowd did not understand at first. They clung to the governor's earlier words, to the promise they thought had been made. When the first penal transports descended, when Arbites lines formed and stun rounds cracked through the air, the hope curdled into confusion, then rage. People ran, people screamed, people died. The governor was executed publicly for incompetence. Order was restored within 6 hours. As we departed, I saw a child standing alone in the plaza, clutching a broken banner pole, its aquila trampled into the dust. She watched our Thunderhawk lift away, her face empty of tears. Hope had burned out of her quickly. She would survive. Others would not. That is how the Imperium selects for endurance. Hope teaches people to look up. Survival teaches them to look ahead. The Imperium needs the latter. It needs citizens who wake, work, and sleep without imagining alternatives. The moment someone imagines a life beyond their assigned function, inefficiency enters the system. Inefficiency costs lives, billions of lives. In a galaxy measured in extinction events, sentiment is a luxury no one can afford. The ruinous powers understand this better than most. They feed on hope as readily as despair. Korn feeds on the hope of victory, Siench on the hope of change, Nurgle on the hope of release, Slanesh on the hope of fulfillment. Every prayer that asks for more than endurance is an invitation. The Imperium's greatest defense against chaos is not faith, but resignation. I have walked through daemon worlds where hope was cultivated like a crop, places where mortals were promised freedom, power, purpose. I have seen what grows from that soil. I have seen cities made of screaming flesh, populations trapped in endless cycles of rebirth and torment, because they once believed they deserved better. Chaos does not lie when it offers hope. It simply does not mention the price. Once, during a joint operation with the Grey Knights, I asked a librarian why their chapter alone was permitted to know the truth of the warp in full. He looked at me for a long time before answering. He said hope cannot survive knowledge, and ignorance cannot survive hope. They walk the knife edge between the two, and most fall eventually. That is why their ranks are so thin. That is why their victories are so absolute and so quiet. The Imperium has learned, across 10,000 years of blood and ash, that stability is not born from optimism. It is born from inevitability. The citizen who believes tomorrow will be the same as today will not rebel. The soldier who believes death is certain will charge without hesitation. The world that believes extermination is preferable to corruption will burn itself willingly. Hope complicates these equations. Even the Emperor understood this in his final silent wisdom. He did not promise a utopia. He promised survival. He did not offer comfort. He offered unity through necessity. The Great Crusade was not fueled by hope of peace, but by fear of extinction. Humanity was shown the darkness waiting beyond its fractured empires and told there was only one way to endure it. Many followed willingly. Others had to be broken. Hope died either way. I sometimes wonder if things might have been different had the Emperor succeeded fully, had the webway been completed, had the warp been rendered irrelevant. But that thought itself is a form of hope, and I discard it as I would a malfunctioning weapon. Speculation does not serve. The Imperium exists as it is because it must. Any other form would have collapsed long ago under the weight of its own ideals. There are moments, rare and fleeting, when hope still tries to surface. A victory against impossible odds, a world saved from annihilation, a brother pulled from the rubble, still breathing. In those moments something stirs, a whisper that says perhaps it mattered, perhaps it meant something. I let the whisper pass. Meaning is another word for vulnerability. The Imperium does not need its defenders to believe in a brighter future. It needs them to believe in duty so absolute it eclipses desire. Duty is clean. Duty is silent. Duty does not ask why. Hope always asks why. I am still a space marine. I still fight. I still kill. I still stand between humanity and the things that would devour it without hesitation. If that makes me a symbol, then so be it. But understand this, I do not represent hope. I represent endurance. I represent the truth that humanity will survive not because it dreams, but because it refuses to stop, no matter how unbearable existence becomes. Hope is dangerous because it makes people forget that survival itself is the victory. In the Imperium of man, that is the only victory that has ever mattered. There are nights, if that word still has meaning, aboard a fortress that orbits a dead star, when the silence presses harder than any enemy. The watch fortress never truly sleeps. Reactors thrum, servitors whisper binharic prayers, distant gun decks cycle through endless readiness drills. And yet there are moments when the noise recedes enough for thought to intrude. Those are the moments the Imperium fears most. Because thought is where hope hides when it has nowhere else to go. I spend those hours in the arming chapel, not in prayer, but in maintenance. The ritual disassembly of my bolter is a comfort. Each component has a purpose. Each spring, each firing pin, each sanctified casing exists to do exactly one thing, and do it without hesitation. There is no hope in a bolter, only function. I envy that clarity. Once, long ago, I tried to pray again. I do not remember the exact words. They felt foreign in my mouth, like a language I had forgotten how to speak. I asked nothing specific, only guidance, only assurance that what we do serves something greater than inertia. The silence that followed was complete. Not the comforting silence of answered faith, but the vast, indifferent silence of the void. I understood then that the Emperor does not answer prayers because answers create expectations. Expectations create hope. The Imperium cannot afford expectations. During the third cleansing of Charon Belt, our kill team was deployed alongside an Astra Militarum battle group, tasked with holding a series of orbital platforms against a rising Orc Wa. The guard commander was young, recently promoted, his uniform still bearing the sharp creases of ambition. He spoke to his troops over open Vox channels, his voice steady, inspiring. He told them they would hold. He told them relief was coming. He told them their sacrifice would mean something. They fought harder for it. They held longer than projections estimated. Casualty rates spiked as men and women refused to fall back when ordered, clinging to firing positions already overrun. When the Orcs finally breached the primary platform and vented half the battle group into space, the commander was found dead at his post, still transmitting encouragement to soldiers who could no longer hear him. His hope had been sincere. His men paid for it in blood. After the engagement, an inquisitorial attaché quietly amended the after-action report. The commander's rhetoric was cited as a contributing factor to unacceptable losses. Future briefings were revised. Language was adjusted. Hope was removed. This is how the Imperium evolves, not toward enlightenment, but toward efficiency. Hope is inefficient because it assumes survival is not enough. It suggests there should be meaning attached to survival, some narrative arc where suffering is justified by outcome. But the galaxy does not operate on narratives. It operates on attrition. Planets are not saved because they deserve it. They are saved because their continued existence serves a logistical or strategic function. When they no longer do, they are expended. I have seen exterminatus enacted without malice, without anger, without ceremony. A virus bomb released, cyclonic torpedoes fired, a world reduced to cinders because the cost of reclaiming it exceeded the value at its output. The crews who carry out these orders do not rage or weep. They perform calculations. They understand that hope for that world would only delay the inevitable and increase collateral loss elsewhere. Hope makes every loss feel personal. The Imperium cannot survive if every loss is mourned. Where warriors from 1,000 chapters stand shoulder to shoulder, hope fractures unity. Each brother arrives with the weight of his chapter's myths, its beliefs, its dreams of redemption or glory. It takes time, sometimes years, for that weight to be burned away by reality. Those who cannot let go grow reckless. They take unnecessary risks to save civilians who will be dead within a generation regardless. They argue for mercy towards Xenos who will betray at the moment advantage shifts. They believe exceptions can be made. Exceptions are how empires die. I once fought beside a blood angel who still believed in redemption. He spoke of sanguinius often, of nobility and sacrifice, of the hope that even monsters might choose restraint. When we encountered a human Xenos hybrid enclave, mutants who claimed to have broken from their masters and sought only isolation, he argued we should spare them. He said extermination would only prove the Imperium's cruelty, would only validate rebellion elsewhere. The Watch Commander listened, then he ordered the purge. The enclave burned. The Blood Angel obeyed, but something in him broke. Weeks later, he succumbed to the Black Rage mid-mission, charging into enemy lines, screaming the name of his Primarch. We put him down ourselves. His hope had not saved anyone. It had simply found another way to kill him. The Imperium does not call this cruelty. It calls it necessity. Cruelty implies choice. Necessity implies inevitability. That distinction is everything. Hope implies choice. There is a reason the Imperium's greatest heroes are martyrs, not because their deaths inspire hope, but because they end it. A dead hero cannot disappoint. A dead hero cannot demand change. Their story is fixed, controllable, repeatable. Living heroes are dangerous. Living heroes suggest survival can be more than continuation. I have lived long enough now that I am spoken of in briefing halls, my name attached to operations, my presence cited as a morale stabilizer. I find this amusing in a distant clinical way. If the men and women who take comfort in my arrival could hear my thoughts, could feel the absence where hope once lived, they would recoil. They do not need the truth, they need the image. That is my role now, to be hope for others while being utterly free of it myself, to stand as proof that humanity endures while knowing endurance is all it will ever achieve. If you are still listening, still searching for meaning in this endless war, understand this final truth. Hope is a luxury of those who do not yet grasp the scale of what we face. The Imperium does not survive despite its darkness. It survives because of it. In a universe where every flicker of optimism casts a shadow long enough for monsters to hide in, the safest light is no light at all. I believed hope was a virtue once. Now I know it is a weakness the Imperium cannot afford. And so I fight on, not for a better tomorrow, but to ensure there is a tomorrow at all, even if it is as bleak and unchanging as the one before it. There are records the Imperium keeps sealed, not because they contain forbidden technology or blasphemous rites, but because they document moments when hope almost won. Those archives are more heavily guarded than many relic vaults, for they prove a truth the Imperium would rather forget, that hope can work, briefly, disastrously, before it collapses under its own weight and takes millions with it. I was exposed to one such record during a classified audit, my gene-coded clearance overriding locks that had not been opened in centuries. It detailed a sector-wide reform initiative during the early M36, a coordinated attempt by administratum adepts, mechanicus logisticians, and several idealistic Astartes chapters to streamline governance, improve living conditions, and reduce rebellion through what they termed measured optimism. They believed that if humanity were shown tangible progress, loyalty would follow naturally. For 73 years, it appeared to succeed. Productivity increased. Recruitment numbers rose. Civil unrest declined. Worlds once considered marginal became stable contributors. And then the variables shifted. A warp storm severed supply lines. A Xenos incursion demanded emergency tithe increases. The carefully balanced system faltered. The populations, having tasted improvement, reacted not with resignation but with outrage. What would once have been endured became intolerable. Rebellions ignited faster than Imperial response times could manage. Entire subsectors burned. The final entry in the record was not an analysis but a decree. The initiative was to be classified as a catastrophic failure. All surviving architects were executed or mind-wiped. The lesson was codified. Improvement creates expectation. Expectation creates dependency. Dependency creates collapse. Hope had almost worked. That was the problem. I have killed men who spoke of rebuilding after the war. They always say after, as if war is a phase rather than a constant state of being, as if there is an endpoint waiting patiently somewhere beyond the next crusade. There is no after. There is only the continuation of now. The Imperium understands this. Its enemies do not. The Tau speak of a greater good, a future where species coexist under enlightened rule. Their greatest weapon is not their technology, but their optimism. They conquer worlds not with terror, but with promises, and it works, until it doesn't. I have seen Tau protectorates crumble when the Imperium returns in force, their populations paralyzed by the realization that the future they were promised was conditional. The survivors do not become loyalists, they become nihilists, fertile ground for chaos. Hope abandoned leaves a deeper scar than despair ever could. Even the Eldar, ancient beyond comprehension, are slaves to hope. Every strand of fate they manipulate, every soulstone they guard, is an attempt to postpone an extinction they know is inevitable. Their arrogance lies not in believing they can win, but in believing survival must mean restoration. They cannot accept mere continuation. That refusal has cost them more than any human atrocity ever could. The Necrons do not hope, they calculate. That is why they are so terrifying. I have come to understand that hope is not an emotion, it is a strategy, and it is a poor one in a universe governed by entropy and predation. The Imperium's strategy is simpler: endure longer than everything else, outlast gods, outlast stars, outlast meaning itself. Sometimes in the aftermath of battle, I see survivors look to the sky, as if expecting some sign that their suffering was noticed. I do not look with them. I have learned that the sky offers no answers, only more war. The Emperor does not watch us with compassion, a corpse god bound to a throne of unimaginable agony, sustaining the Imperium not through hope, but through sacrifice without end. That is the final lesson, the one that takes the longest to accept. The Imperium is not waiting to be saved, it is waiting to finally collapse, and until that day comes, it will consume everything: faith, love, optimism, entire civilizations, to delay the moment by one more second. Hope accelerates collapse by demanding resolution. The Imperium survives by denying it. I no longer dream. Dreams are where hope rehearses itself. I rest, I rise, I fight, I kill, I endure. That is all that is required of me, and it is enough. If you still feel the pull of hope after hearing this, then perhaps you are not meant for the Imperium as it truly is, or perhaps you are exactly what it needs, another reminder of why hope must be crushed before it grows strong enough to matter. I believed hope was dangerous once, because I was told it was. I know it is dangerous now because I have seen what happens when it is allowed to live. And so the Imperium marches on, blind, brutal, and unyielding, not because it dreams of victory, but because it refuses to stop losing. There is a final cruelty to hope that I have not yet spoken of, perhaps because it is the most intimate. Hope does not merely endanger worlds and empires. It endangers memory. It rewrites the past into something survivable, something comforting, something false. And the Imperium cannot tolerate false memories any more than it can tolerate false gods. I have walked the ruins of worlds that once believed themselves blessed. Shrine worlds, agri worlds, bastion worlds whose histories were filled with tales of divine intervention and miraculous survival. Their archives spoke of moments when disaster was averted, when the Emperor's hand was said to have guided events towards salvation. Those stories were repeated until they became doctrine, until people believed protection was their due. When the protection failed, when the Tyranids came or the warp split the sky or the orcs fell from orbit like meteors of green flesh and iron, the shock was not tactical, it was spiritual. Populations paralyzed not by fear but by disbelief. This was not how the story was supposed to end. They waited for rescue that never came. They prayed harder instead of running. They died holding on to a version of the past that had promised them survival. Hope had taught them to remember incorrectly. The Imperium prefers a harsher memory, one where nothing is guaranteed, one where survival is always provisional, always temporary. A memory where every generation understands that extinction is not a failure of faith, but a statistical outcome that simply has not occurred yet. This is why history is edited. This is why records are redacted. This is why victories are framed as endurance rather than triumph. A triumph invites repetition. Endurance invites obedience. I learned this lesson personally during a campaign whose name has since been struck from official rolls. We were tasked with reinforcing a shrine world whose population had resisted evacuation orders, convinced their faith rendered them untouchable. Their leaders quoted ancient deliverances, times when catastrophe had passed them by. They believed they were chosen. When we arrived, the skies were already burning. We fought our way through cathedral streets, choked with incense and ash. Civilians knelt, even as last fire tore through them, convinced that witnessing our arrival was proof of divine favor. Some followed us into battle, unarmed, chanting hymns, certain the Emperor would shield them. They died first. They always do. Afterward, as the world was scoured and declared irrecoverable, an ecclesiarchy delegation requested permission to preserve the site as a martyr world, to spin the annihilation into a narrative of sacred sacrifice. The request was denied. The official record lists the planet as lost to Xenos infestation, population non-compliant, outcome regrettable but necessary. No miracles, no lessons of hope, just failure, properly framed. That denial saved lives elsewhere. Fewer worlds would believe themselves special. Fewer populations would wait for salvation instead of obeying evacuation protocols. Hope was amputated, and the body of the Imperium continued to move. I have begun to suspect that this is the Imperium's truest form of mercy. Not kindness, not compassion, but accuracy. It tells its people the truth through cruelty, because gentler truths would kill more of them in the long run. Hope lies by omission. Despair tells the whole story. The enemies of mankind do not fear our weapons as much as they fear our acceptance of this reality. Chaos preys on yearning. Xenos exploit optimism. But an empire that expects only suffering cannot be easily tempted. You cannot corrupt someone who already knows the cost and pays it willingly. That is why the Imperium still stands when so many brighter civilizations have turned to dust. I no longer resent this. Resentment is another form of hope, the hope that things should have been different. They should not have been. They could not have been. The galaxy does not allow it. If there is any peace to be found in this endless war, it is the peace of certainty. The certainty that no promise will be kept. The certainty that no ending will arrive. The certainty that survival itself is the only metric that matters. I fight not because I believe we will win, but because stopping would mean losing faster. I do not hope for humanity's triumph. I ensure its continuation. One battle, one purge, one extinguished dream at a time. This is why hope is dangerous in the Imperium of man, because hope asks for meaning, and meaning is a weakness the galaxy will always exploit. I have been asked more than once whether this way of thinking hollows a soul. The question usually comes from those who still believe a soul is something that can be preserved intact through 10,000 years of unending war. I never answer directly, not because I lack an answer, but because the question itself is already infected with hope. It assumes there is a version of us that could have remained whole. There was never such a version. When I look back, carefully, clinically, I do not see a fall from grace. I see a gradual alignment with reality. Each campaign corrected another false assumption. Each purge sanded down another comforting lie. Hope did not die all at once. It was refined out of me, like an impurity burned away in a forge that never cools. I remember the last time I felt something that could honestly be called hope. Not for humanity, not for the Imperium, but for myself. It was during a boarding action against a derelict pilgrim flotilla adrift near the Maelstrom. The ships had gone silent decades earlier, their course locked toward a shrine world they would never reach. Inside we found survivors, descendants of the original pilgrims, living in sealed compartments, recycling air and faith in equal measure. They had built a society around the belief that rescue would come, that the Emperor would not abandon those who sought him. They had endured for generations on that belief alone. For a moment, one brief treasonous moment, I thought we might save them, tow them to safety, integrate the survivors, preserve something unbroken. The calculations ran in my mind, rapid and precise. It was possible, costly, but possible. The flotilla was declared a contamination risk, unknown mutations, cultural deviation, unverified doctrine. Cyclonic charges were set. As we withdrew, I heard singing over the Vox, hymns echoing through corridors that were about to become fire. They died believing rescue had finally arrived. That was the last ember of hope I ever allowed myself to feel, and I watched it burn along with them. After that, things became simpler. The Imperium does not need its warriors to be inspired. It needs them to be accurate about the odds, accurate about the costs, accurate about what must be done and what must never be attempted again. Hope clouds accuracy. It adds variables that cannot be controlled. There are moments when civilians look at us, at me, and I can see the exact second hope ignites behind their eyes. The arrival of an Astartes still carries mythic weight. Children point, elders weep, voices rise in prayer. In those moments, I become very careful. I limit gestures. I avoid promises. I do not meet their gaze longer than necessary. I let the illusion die quickly rather than fester. A fast death is a kindness in this galaxy. Some accuse the Imperium of cruelty because it does not try to be better. They do not understand that trying to be better is how you die faster. Better is a direction. Survival is a state. The Imperium has chosen its state and clings to it with bloody, unyielding hands. Even now, somewhere in the vastness of Imperial space, there are worlds teaching their children that the war will end, that one day the stars will be safe, that the sacrifices mean something beyond delay. Those worlds will burn sooner than the rest, not because the Imperium hates them, but because the galaxy does. Hope paints targets. I have become something I never imagined I would be. Not a hero, not a savior, but a warning. My existence is proof that humanity can endure unimaginable horror if it abandons the need for reassurance. That we can survive the truth if we stop demanding it be gentle. If you take anything from these words, let it be this. The Imperium of man is not a tragedy because it lacks hope. It is a tragedy because hope was tried, tested, and found wanting. What remains is not ideal, not just, not merciful, but it works. And in a universe actively trying to erase you, it works, is the highest praise there is. I do not fight for a dawn that will never come. I fight to hold the line in an endless night, knowing full well there is no sunrise waiting beyond it. That knowledge does not weaken me, it steadies me. Hope would make me hesitate, and hesitation is how humanity dies. There is a temptation, when speaking this long about the danger of hope, to believe that its absence leaves only emptiness, that without it existence becomes mechanical, joyless, reduced to marching and killing and waiting to die. This is another lie, subtler than most. Hope is not replaced by nothing. It is replaced by resolve. And resolve, unlike hope, does not demand reassurance. I have fought beside men and women who had nothing left to believe in except the order they were given 5 minutes ago. And they were the most reliable soldiers I have ever known. Not brave, not inspired, reliable. They did not ask if the position battered. They did not ask if relief was coming. They dug in, fired until their weapons failed, then fought with bare hands until there was nothing left of them to give. The Imperium is built on such people, not on dreamers. The dreamers come later, to record the sacrifice and give it meaning. The Imperium tolerates them because stories are useful tools, but it never lets them near the levers of power. Those are reserved for the ones who understand that meaning is optional, but survival is not. I have stood in the Strategium as worlds were marked for abandonment, entire populations written off with a stylus stroke. The officers present did not argue morality. They argued tonnage, warp lanes, response times. Somewhere in those discussions, billions of lives became irrelevant, and no one flinched. That is not because they were monsters. It is because they had learned what happens when you hesitate out of hope. They had seen the alternative, and it was worse. Hope convinces you that every life can be saved. The Imperium knows this is mathematically impossible. Sometimes I imagine what an outsider would think if they could hear these thoughts. They would call me broken. They would say I've surrendered something essential. Perhaps they are right. But broken things can still function, and in the Imperium, function is the only measure that matters. A flawless blade that refuses to strike is less useful than a chipped one that never fails. I do not hate hope. Hatred requires investment. I regard it the way one regards radiation. Invisible, seductive in small doses, lethal when allowed to accumulate. You do not debate radiation. You shield against it. You purge it when contamination is detected. The Imperium treats hope the same way, and for good reason. I have watched new recruits arrive still carrying it, tucked away behind discipline and indoctrination. You can see it in the way they look at banners, at relics, at us. They think these symbols mean something beyond survival. Most of them will learn quickly. Those who do not will die, or worse, live long enough to infect others with their expectations. The Imperium does not execute hope because it enjoys cruelty. It does so because it has learned, through endless repetition, that hope scales poorly. A single hopeful man might survive. A hopeful world will rebel. A hopeful sector will collapse. An empire built on hope will shatter the moment reality asserts itself. This is the lesson written in the ruins of 1,000,000 dead civilizations. Even now, somewhere beyond the reach of imperial charts, there are species laughing beneath open skies, convinced their future is secure. I do not envy them. I pity them. The galaxy has not noticed them yet. When it does, hope will make their extinction faster and more complete. The Imperium, by contrast, expects nothing. That expectation has kept it alive for 10,000 years. If there is a final irony in all of this, it is that the Imperium itself is humanity's last hope, though it would never use that word. Not hope for peace, not hope for enlightenment. Hope only in the narrowest, most brutal sense, that humanity will still exist tomorrow in some diminished, battered form. That the species will continue to cast a shadow, however small, across a hostile universe. That hope is never spoken aloud, because speaking it would weaken it. I will continue to fight until I fall, not because I believe my actions will be remembered, but because forgetting them would change nothing. The Imperium will grind on without me, as it grinds on without all of us, fueled not by dreams, but by momentum and fear and necessity. And when I finally die, there will be no revelation waiting, no vindication of suffering, no promise fulfilled. There will only be the continuation of war, uninterrupted by my absence. That is accuracy. Hope would ask for more. The Imperium survives by refusing to ask. I speak these words not as a warning meant to change anything, but as a record. The Imperium does not change. It accumulates. It layers atrocity upon atrocity until the weight itself becomes structure. That is what we live inside. That is what holds. Somewhere, even now, a child is being born beneath a hive's rusted sky. They will never see the stars except as distant points of terror. They will learn early that food is rationed, that silence is safer than questions, that obedience is the closest thing to mercy they will ever know. If they survive long enough, they may be told stories of heroes, of victories, of a future worth enduring for. Those stories will not be meant for them. They will be meant to keep them moving. If that child learns hope, truly learns it, then the Imperium has already failed them, because hope will teach them to imagine escape instead of endurance. Hope will teach them to measure their suffering against something better and find it unjust. Hope will teach them to ask why the Emperor demands everything and gives nothing back. And once that question is asked, the answer will never satisfy. Not the Imperium's answer, not Chaos's answer, not any answer the galaxy offers. The galaxy does not reward understanding, it rewards persistence. I have lived long enough to see hopeful men become rebels, rebels become heretics, heretics become monsters. I have seen hopeful worlds burn brighter than the rest, only to be snuffed out faster. I have seen hopeful prayers answered by things wearing the shapes of gods and the voices of salvation. And I have seen what comes after. Hope does not save humanity from damnation. It delivers humanity to it. So the Imperium teaches a harsher creed, not spoken openly, not carved into monuments, but enforced through fire and silence and repetition. You will suffer, and it will not end, and that is not a mistake. That is the design. Accept it, and you may live. Reject it, and you will die screaming, convinced the universe betrayed you. I no longer believe the Imperium will win. Winning implies an end. I believe only that it will last longer than anything else, grinding itself forward through time like a wounded beast too stubborn to fall. That is not glory. That is not justice. That is survival stripped of illusion. And that is why hope is dangerous, because hope whispers that this cannot be all there is. But this is all there is. Endless war, endless sacrifice, endless endurance, and an Imperium that lives not because it dreams of tomorrow, but because it has murdered every dream that might slow it down. I am a weapon shaped by that truth. I endure, and that is enough.